Hi everyone, my name is Harrison with the Luxury Pergola. Today we're talking about troubleshooting, programming your motorized shades, whether you have one or multiple. So this is going to get broken up into different chunks. The first section here I'm going to talk about is programming multiple shades and the process in order to do that. The second section is going to be general troubleshooting, meaning as you are programming, something went awry. How do you fix it now? The last section is going to be troubleshooting long term. You're noticing something that showed up that isn't right, doesn't feel right. There are a couple things that could happen and how to address those problems and kind of the sequence of solutions. So that's what we're gonna cover today, and hopefully we can keep it as exciting as possible. If you know what your problem is, you can obviously jump around. Okay, so the first section here is gonna be programming multiple shades. Now, if you're gonna program multiple shades, you're going to have a multi-channel remote. These look like the same box, but they are different. Multi-channel remote is gonna have 5 different channels on it. Has the same back plate, but the 5 channels you can see here down at the bottom. If you look at it, you can see that that is flashing. You press it once to see what channel you're on. Okay, so I press it once, I see 1 is flashing. If I let it stop, it'll stay on channel 1. Press it again, so I'm on channel 1. You press it a second time to switch channels. So now I'm on channel 2. I press it again, I'm on channel 3. I press it again, I'm on channel 4. I press it again when all of them are lit up, that's channel 5. Those are the 5 channels that you can program onto a 5-channel remote. A standard remote obviously has 1 channel on it. You won't see the 5 LEDs at the bottom. If you needed to get a 5-channel and you actually have a single, reach out to us, we'll ship you a 5-channel. If you're adding a shade after you already have a unit, reach out to us. You're gonna need to buy a 5-channel with your new set of shades. You can keep this one so that you have an extra remote, but you'll need this to program this later on. Okay, so single channel remote, 1 LED, 5-channel remote, multiple LEDs. There's also now a button at the bottom. There's no button at the bottom on a single channel. These are the differences. If you already have 1 shade installed and you already have this remote, all it's gonna be is adding this channel to this remote. That's all you're gonna have to do. We'll get to that later on. So, if you're programming multiple shades, you're gonna follow the same procedure we go through in the install video, meaning first you're gonna wake up the motor. So you're gonna go to the correct channel. Let's say I always program the shades from left to right, the way that we read. If you're a Western country, if you're from somewhere else that reads right to left, sorry. So left to right. So let's say the shade on my left is gonna be channel 1, the shade in front of me is channel 2, and the shade to my right is gonna be channel 3. And then channel 4 is actually gonna be all of the shades. That's how we're gonna set this up. So I'm going to channel 1, I'm gonna go through the same setup procedure. I'm gonna wake up the motor, which means holding up and down at the same time. The motor will jog. Then I'm gonna check the direction. Down needs to be down, up needs to be up. If I don't like it, I'll hold the My button, which will change directions. So now down is actually down and up is actually up. Once I like the directions, I'll take it all the way to its upper limit where I have basically that hem bar near the cassette. I'll then hold the My and down button, which is saying, yes, I like how tall it is. Now let's go down. Hold these 2 buttons, it'll automatically go down all on its own. You'll then stop it at the bottom where you want it to stop. If you stopped it too early, you'll just continue to hold or press the bottom button until it gets to its correct bottom limit. You'll hold the My and up button, send it all the way up. It'll return to its upper limit that you had set just a few seconds ago. Once it's stopped at the upper limit, you hold the My button, and then it jogs, and then you press and hold the button on the back using your pencil, and then it will jog. Now you've programmed shade 1 to this remote onto channel 1. To program the second shade, you'll need to switch to channel 2. Now, the important thing with doing any of these multiple shades programming, hook them to power 1 at a time. So let's say you have 1 big junction box where all of them are tying into the same 120 volt line. You're gonna hook up shade 1, program it. Then you're gonna add shade 2. You're gonna program it. Then you're gonna add shade 3 and program it. If you add all of them simultaneously and go to any of these channels and try to program it, you'll be programming all of them simultaneously, which is when you get into a problem. And we talk about that in the second section of this video with the troubleshooting. So once you program shade 1, You then switch to channel 2, hook up power to shade 2, follow the exact same procedure I just showed you before. Once you get to channel 3 or shade 3, you'd hook up shade 3 to power, move to channel 3, program channel 3. Now all 3 shades should be programmed onto their individual channels. To add a shade from one channel to another channel, you would go to the channel it's currently at, let's say shade 1. I want to put on channel 4 because I want all 3 shades on channel 4. So to add one on channel 4, it'll stay on channel 1 and I'll also add it to channel 4. You'll go to channel 1 where it's currently on, hold the program button on the back, the shade will jog. Then you'll move to channel 4, hold the program button on the back, it will jog again. Now you've added, channel 4 will also operate shade 1. Hopefully this is helpful so far. To add the second shade, because you want all of them working on the same channel, you go to shade 2, hold the program button on the back, move over to channel 4, hold the program button on the back. Remember, it needs to jog every time you hold that program button, okay? Now shade 1 and 2 should also be on channel 4. They can also still be used on channel 1 and 2, but both will operate simultaneously on channel 4. Then you follow the exact same procedure with shade 3. Go to channel 3, hold the program button, it jogs. Go to channel 4, hold the program button, it'll jog again. Now channel 4 will operate all of them. Press the down button, they all go down simultaneously. Press the up button, they all go up simultaneously. It's very cool. So that's programming multiple shades onto one channel. Remember, hook them up to power individually, program one at a time. So hook up shade 1, program it, hook up shade 2, program it, hook up shade 3, program it. Once they're all programmed to at least a channel, you can start programming them. All right, so troubleshooting. So let's say you're setting the limits, and the first thing people typically will do wrong is they'll set the wrong limit. So when you set the upper limit and you said this is actually the top, you didn't mean it. You actually want it to go higher up. You accidentally held the my and down button. It thinks that's the top. You're panicking. It's all good. Finish the programming. Finish the bottom limit, finish the my, finish the power button on the back. You can adjust the upper limit later. Same thing is true for lower limit, okay? So now that you've programmed everything and it's sitting on channel 1, we're looking at shade 1, and the upper limit isn't as tall as you actually want it to be. The way you change the upper limit is you press and hold the up and down buttons at the same time, which wakes up the motor, the same thing you did early on. So go to the correct channel, channel 1, shade 1, hold the up and down buttons simultaneously. The motor will jog, then you release. Then you adjust it to its new upper position. So you're saying, hey, this upper limit, I actually want it higher up. You'd press the up button until it went to where you wanted it to actually go. And then you press the my button until the motor jogs. You just reset the upper limit to a new level. The exact same procedure works at the bottom limit. Now you have to send it to its current bottom limit. Then once it's at its current limit, hold the up and down button, it'll jog. Move it to where you actually want it, hold the my button, it'll jog. If you're not actually at a limit and you try and do one of these things, it won't work. So make sure you're at the upper limit to reprogram it, all the way at the lower limit to program it. The one reason why people will typically adjust the upper limit over time or the lower limit over time is because the fabric itself can sometimes stretch over several years, right? So it is still a polyester. It can still stretch from sun, wind, like it's a flexible fabric. So what you'll find is that that upper limit that was tied up against the cassette starts to show a little bit of fabric. You don't like seeing that little bit of fabric. You can always now adjust that upper limit a little bit higher. Same thing's true for the lower limit. It's too low now. There's a little bit of sag in the fabric. You want it a little tighter. You can do the same thing, set it to its lower limit, adjust it, all be good. So that's how you fix stretch. That's how you program multiple shades, and that's how you fix the upper and lower limits after the fact. If you want to add another remote, let's say you have small children and you expect them to somehow lose this remote and you're worried about losing the remote, you can buy a spare remote. So let's say you want a second remote, you can buy a spare remote, and then that way you can do the exact same thing that I showed you of adding channels 1, 2, and 3 to channel 4 onto another remote. So let's say this is remote 1 and this is remote 2. On remote 1, you go to the correct channel, let's say channel 1, hold the program button on the back. Go to channel 1 on the brand new remote, hold the program button on the back. Shade 1 is now on both remotes. And then you follow the exact same procedure on every single channel with every single shade. On channel 4, because they're all programmed to channel 4, if you hold that program button on the back, they'll all jog, which is correct. You'll go to your new remote, hold channel 4, press the button on the back, it'll jog again. The reason why that's important, if you lose this remote, let's say you have one remote, you lose this remote for any reason, and it no longer works, you will need to reset all of your motors and go through programming all of them again. I'll talk about the reset section here in just a few seconds. The reset portion of these shades is the one thing about these shades that takes time and is not super fun. So make sure you program everything thoroughly, take your time going through it, and I would recommend if you think you're gonna lose the remote for any reason, you buy a second remote and you program a second remote and you file it away somewhere where it will never get destroyed, damaged, rained on, thrown in a pool, lost by children, etc. Let's say you programmed everything, or you were in the middle of programming and you suddenly did something wrong, you have no idea what you did wrong, everything's messed up. Or let's say you programmed all the shades simultaneously and you just don't know what to do anymore. The best solution is to just reset the motors and start from scratch. So let's say you have all the shades hooked up to power and somehow you programmed all of them simultaneously and you need to fix it. Unhook all of them from power and then reset and program them one shade at a time as if you were restarting the entire process. The reset portion for these shades requires hooking and unhooking power. There's a couple different ways you can do it. One is to actually put a plug on the end of the whip for the drop shade and plug it into an extension cord, unplug it, plug it in. That's one way to do it. The easier way to do it is to hook up that shade to power, go to the breaker box, have a second person watching the shade, and have them flip the breaker box to feed power to the shade and feed it off. Hopefully, your unit isn't hooked up to a breaker that's also running your kitchen that needs to have power right now. But that is the easiest way to reset the motor. It keeps you from touching wires together. You don't want to go through that whole hassle because you have to hold them together at the end. So breaker box is the easiest solution. One person stands out there, watches the shade, one person goes to the breaker box, you hook up one shade to power, you're gonna reset that one. The way this works is you disconnect power to the shade, so you shut off the breaker box. You disconnect power to the shade for 2 seconds, reconnect it for 10 seconds, and these are Mississippis. This is a Mississippi second, not a quick second. So it's 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, okay? Or 1,000, 1,000, 2, 1,000, whatever. You can't do 1, 2. All right, so shut off the power for 2 seconds, reconnect for 10, shut off for 2, reconnect. At that point, the motor should jog. If it did not jog, you will start over. Disconnect 2 seconds, reconnect 10 seconds, disconnect 2 seconds, reconnect. Motor should jog, okay? If your motor has, and you'll keep doing that until it jogs. You can wait a little bit in between each reset. You can wait a few seconds before you try it again, but sometimes it'll respond immediately and sometimes it'll take, 2 attempts. Typically, I have seen it responds immediately if someone's out there watching it. If you try and do this on your own, you're never gonna know if it's getting reset or not. So this will jog, okay? Once the motor stops, sometimes it'll just move instead of jog. Once the motor stops, you press and hold the program button on the back of the remote and count to 10 before letting go. This is the important part. The motor will jog twice, not once, twice. Because what'll happen is you'll do your disconnect, the motor will jog. You'll walk back there, you'll hold the program button, it'll jog. If you let go, you gotta go back to the breaker box and try this over again. So it needs to jog 2 times. Every installer that I have worked with has messed that portion up, and I have to tell them it needs to jog twice. So remember, jog twice. So disconnect 2 seconds, reconnect 10, disconnect 2, reconnect, walk back there, hold the program button, jogs once, keep holding it, keep holding it, keep holding it, jog twice. Now it's reset, it's ready for programming. At that point, you go to the correct channel, channel 1, do the same process. Wake up the motor, set your upper limit, set your lower limit. Once it gets back up to the upper limit, hold program, you're finished. So one of the things long-term that people see is they're worried about dripping, for example. Let's say you're getting water, it feels like it's dripping from the inside of the shade, you're worried about it. The reason why it's doing that is going to be how much caulk was applied from the gutter inside the beam. So make sure that where the wire comes through the beam, you sealed that correctly, or add caulk to seal it correctly. If you need more, contact us. We can work out getting you some more sealant. So that's one thing that we have seen people complain about or concerned about. That's just a matter of, semi-improper installation. Just make sure you seal where the wire comes through the unit. Second thing people contact us about every so often and ask questions about is the motor has an object avoidance built into the motor. The concept there is if it runs into you or a dog or a chair or any other live or inanimate object, you don't want it crushing that object. Now it's not that heavy that it'll actually do it, but you don't want it to cause discomfort. So it has object avoidance. It'll feel like it's not able to actually go down because it's not receiving the same level of tension. And so it'll automatically then retract. The reason why that's important, in the winter, these shades are on vinyl tracks. Vinyl expands and contracts in high and cold temperatures. If that vinyl contracts to the point where it feels like there's too much tension on the zipper section of the drop shade, let's say it's 20 degrees out, and for whatever reason, you decide you need to drop the shade. Now, while they can operate in the winter, just know that there might be a little bit more squeaking from humidity, and that extra tension can cause the object avoidance, in theory, to kick on. So as it's coming down, it'll feel like it's getting object avoidance, it'll kick back up a little bit, and it'll stop. That's what object avoidance looks like. So to turn off obstacle avoidance, you take the shade to its halfway point. It doesn't have to be scientific, but roughly halfway point. You do this process quickly. So just know all the steps first before you try to do this, because every button press has to be done within 2 seconds of the prior button press or button press series. So you got to do this quickly. So you're first going to press the Mayan up button, let go, and then press and hold the Mayan up button. So that's a press, let go, press and hold. The motor will jog, okay? So that is going to be a short button press. So I'll actually do it on the remote. So it's going to be Mayan up, let go, Mayan up, hold for 2 seconds, the screen will jog, let go. That's the first sequence. Then you're going to change the setting by clicking the up button, right? So if I press this up button, the motor's gonna jog short, meaning obstacle avoidance is on. If you press it and it's a slower jog, the object avoidance is turned off. Okay, so if you press it and it does a short one, press it again, it'll do a slow one. If you're not sure which is slow and fast, just keep switching it until one is noticeably slower. And then you go, oh, okay, that is it off. It is now. Then you confirm it by holding the My button. That will confirm it. Object avoidance is no longer on. That's up to you if you want to turn it on or off. So that's how you turn off or on the object avoidance system in there. So as I said, in the winter, because the tracks can get a little cold and they contract, and so there's a little bit more tension, you can have it trigger every so often. I haven't had it happen to the shades at my house, but I have heard of people having that sort of issue. The other thing you'll find is if it was installed incorrectly, meaning out of square or out of plumb on the top, is that hem bar doesn't want to fall uniformly, and because of that, it wants to kick up on one side, or if it's splayed out too much and there's too much tension, that object avoidance could kick on and it could want to come back up. So make sure it's installed correctly, but if you're noticing that object avoidance triggering every so often, or the shade is coming down like this and then slapping down, I would check to see that the cassette is level, because the cassette has to be level and the tracks have to be plumb and the whole thing has to be square with itself to make sure that everything runs smoothly and properly. If you have any questions about that specific section of the installation, obviously you can reach out to us. The last two things that people will contact us and have concerns about is it's not working. And it's not working typically means either a power problem or a proximity problem, or a remote problem, which is a power problem, okay? So everything's normal, you're out there, you click a button, the shade isn't doing it, you don't know what's going on, it always does it, I don't know why it's not doing it now. That's basically the scenario. The first thing you should look at is gonna be the breaker for the actual circuit that the shade is on. Hopefully it was labeled by your electrician or by you if you actually did the shades. Hopefully it was labeled. If it wasn't labeled, you're gonna have to test and find out what circuit the shade is on. Once you check that, make sure the breaker's turned on. That's always the first step. The second step is going to see if that breaker is on a GFI circuit in general. So what that means is, let's imagine that the breaker is the end of this paper, okay? And along that circuit, there are actually multiple outlets, okay? I'm using this as an example of multiple outlets because your circuit is basically a stream. If you have one outlet, like in your kitchen, for example, has that test reset, that's a GFI outlet. If that GFI outlet is triggered along that circuit, often it will stop feeding any electricity beyond that GFI on outdoor related circuits. Sometimes same is true for new construction in garages. Outdoor circuits, a lot of times in new construction, are also on the same circuit as the garage, and the GFI outlet is actually in the garage, and you have to reset the GFI on the outlet in the garage for the shades to work. Go figure. So take your phone, plug it into a charger, and start testing outlets and make sure all the outlets in your house work. If all the outlets in your house work, then it's not a power issue to the shade. At least you can generally assume it isn't a power issue to the shade. Next thing I do is check the remote, make sure that everything lights up. You can always preemptively change the batteries in these remotes. They're standard cell batteries. Change the battery in the remote to test that as well. If the battery in the remote's been checked, GFIs have been checked, breaker's been checked, everything has been checked, and the shade isn't working, or especially if you have multiple shades all on the same circuit and only one of them isn't working, then I'd reach out to us, because then the question becomes, well, has something happened to cause interference with that specific shade? So at that point, I would reach out to us. People also have that problem when it comes to proximity. So like sometimes it'll work when you're closer and sometimes it'll work when you're further away. So it works when I'm across the yard on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but today, for whatever reason, I was across the yard, I tried to use it, it didn't work. A lot of that can do with just radio interference in general. These are a RTS remote. They're a radio frequency operated remote. Radio waves in general, like radio that you listen to, could interfere with it, and you could get limited range depending on the day and depending on the devices and activity in the area around you. So just know that proximity is pretty decent on these remotes and on the shades. If you're inside the pergola, they should be working. But if you try and use it from further away, you'll sometimes get hit or miss results. So that is helpful to know. Okay, one thing to note when you're programming all of these shades, if you start programming things wildly and trying to reprogram a shade 3 times and it's 90 degrees out, they do have an overheat limit built into the shade to avoid basically too much wear and tear on the motor itself. So at a certain point, if that motor gets too hot, it will actually shut off and not let you continue programming it. It doesn't mean that you broke it while you were in the middle of programming. It just means that it hit its overheat limit. Downside is you don't really know that. So it doesn't have an LED that tells you it's overheated. It's just kind of common knowledge. You've been sitting here messing with a shade and programming it for the last 30 minutes and it's 100 degrees out in Indiana in August and it's 100% humidity. It's probably overheated. So just know that also. That is one of the caveats when you're going through programming this. That is why it's always better to watch this whole video and then just sit there and program one shade, meticulously following the instructions. We do have these instructions also on our website to walk you through how to do the programming itself. So if you follow the instructions meticulously, you should be fine. But if you hit that overheat limit, it doesn't mean you broke it. It just means it overheated. Yeah, the answer if it overheats is you have to wait. And that is depending on the ambient temperature and the amount of sunlight, it is semi-indefinite amount of time, typically 20 minutes. I've seen it less. I've also seen where after 20 minutes, you go to program it again, you're halfway through programming it and the overheating kicks on again. And so you have to go back and reset the whole thing. If I were you and you hit the overheat limit and you're at your own home, meaning you have all the time in the world, I would just wait till like a few hours later or till it's cooler, like at night later in the day. Much easier than trying to do it at high noon at 100 degrees. If you're an installer and you're out there looking at the shade and you're frustrated, I feel your pain. I've been there. It's one of the benefits of these motors that they won't overheat in a severe way, but it's also one of the downsides. So that is troubleshooting your shades. Hopefully you know how to program all the different types of shades, how to add different remotes, how to program a secondary remote, which I highly recommend, how to deal with object avoidance, and how to handle troubleshooting issues should something go wrong either during the installation or after the installation.
Now that you have your screen set up, the remote's working, you've gone through all the troubleshooting, I'm gonna go over how to connect it to the smart controls that you can buy with your luxury pergola. The smart controls will allow you to open and close your shade from your phone, and if you have the sun, wind, and rain sensor, your shades can react to the weather just like your luxury pergola can. So to get started, all you need is your remote and your smartphone, and we can get started. You'll be able to see what I'm doing on my phone on the screen so that you can follow along. So first thing you do is open up the Bond Home app, and then on the top right corner, you're gonna see a plus button. Go ahead and click that. After you click that, under devices, you're gonna see shades, roofs, screens, and awnings. Click that one. It's gonna ask you which Bond Bridge Pro you want to connect to. If you have more than one, make sure you click on the one that is closest physically to your motorized shade. Now, if you bought your Bond Bridge Pro from us, your options are gonna say luxury pergola or super luxury pergola. Unfortunately, neither of those apply. You're gonna wanna click Show All, which is directly below those options. After you click Show All, the first few options should say Somfy Shade, Somfy Blinds, or Somfy RTS Awning. You're gonna wanna click Somfy Shade, and in the description, support for open and close. Now it is gonna tell you to bring the Bond Bridge Pro as close to the screen as possible. This is always good advice. The farther away it is, the harder it is to pair. So if you have an extension cord, go ahead and plug in your Bond Bridge Pro, bring it on out close to the screen. Then you'll click Start. It'll ask you about your device. So you could name this, let's say West Side Shade, or East, North, whatever cardinal direction, or you could name it Shade 1, Shade 2. It's really up to you. The location needs to be the same location as your pergola. So it'll probably be patio or sunroom or something like that. And then subtype is gonna be roller shade. You shouldn't have to change that. So I named this one front shade, and then hit continue. Now this is where the remote comes in. It's gonna ask you to prepare your device. What that means is it is going to ask you to hold down this red programming button. If you have a multi-channel remote, you'll have to do that separately for each channel. So we're gonna do this one at a time. So assume you have a single channel, then hold down the red button. It should jog, which means the screen will go down and up. So that way you know it's responding, just like when you're programming the shade initially with your remote. After the shade jogs with the remote, you shouldn't need this anymore. And it'll ask you to pair/unpair your device. What this does is it pairs the Bond Bridge Pro to your shade. So you'll hit the pair button and it should jog the shade just like it did when you clicked the red button. So again, don't click the red button again, but when you hit pair, it should jog the screen just like it did with the remote. What this does is it basically adds another remote to that shade. The Bond Bridge is gonna act like another remote for you. Then it's gonna ask you to test your commands. So does it open when you click open? Does it close when you hit close? And does it stop when you hit the stop button? So double check, make sure all those functions work. Once they are working, go ahead and hit done. Next, it's gonna ask you to set up your slider. Now this is really cool. You can actually choose on the app how far down you want the screen by percentages. So do you want it 50% down, 100%, 0% open, which is when it's all closed. So you can use a slider to actually choose how low that screen gets. It's a really cool feature. So for the setup, it's gonna ask you to close. So hit that close button and it should roll the screen all the way down to the bottom. The way the slider works is it's basically on a timer. So how long does it take to go from 0% to 100%? And then the app will just say 50% is half the time. So let it roll for that amount of time before I hit the stop button. It automates that whole process and gives you slider functionality. So you will be using the timer in the app to figure out how far the screen is. So once it's all the way closed, it's gonna ask you to hit the open button, which will start a timer. You'll be able to see the timer on the screen, just like I see it on my phone here. And once it is at the top, or once it is finished moving, you're gonna hit the stop timer button. So for me, that took 28.6 seconds. Now it's gonna test the course time. So you can actually manually adjust the slider time to figure out if it's accurate or not. So you can open it up all the way, close it all the way, and adjust your timer based on how long it actually took. And once the timer is set up, you're done. You'll have slider functionality, open, close, as well as the stop button. Now, let's say you have the sun, wind, and rain sensor for your pergola. How do we set that up with your shade? So to set up the weather sensor functions on your shade, hopefully you already have this connected to your pergola. If not, follow the directions to connect this and then come back to this video. But once this is set up, you'll click on your Breeze Pro sensor and you'll be able to see the current wind speed, rain status, sun intensity, and when it was last measured. And at the bottom, you're gonna see in blue text something that says set thresholds. You're gonna wanna click on that. For the screen, the big thing to focus on is gonna be wind detection. If you have 70 or 80 mile an hour winds, you don't want the screen down. So set a wind threshold. Again, the wind thresholds, do not connect that to your louvers as well unless you absolutely need to. The wind threshold calculator tops out at 80 miles an hour. Our system can handle well beyond that. So for the wind thresholds, we're only gonna pair the screen to that. You're gonna see in the app that I'm using that I actually have my luxury pergola hooked up to the wind detection. That was just to test it. You should not do that. So I am unlinking the luxury pergola because that's redundant. We don't need that. Then I'm gonna click link a new device to be triggered. So that new device is going to be our shade. So I will click on the shade that's gonna be linked called front shade. We named it earlier. And then what do I want it to do when the wind sensor is triggered? So once the wind is over 40 miles an hour, what do I want it to do? In this case, I want it to open. So I want this wall to be gone. I want the screen to be all the way rolled up in high winds. So I'm gonna click open, and then I can set the wind speed at which I want the screen to retract. In this example, I did 40 miles an hour. Probably a bit much. You could do 20, 30, 40, whatever makes sense for you. Our screens are rated for 40 miles an hour. So in this case, I did 40. And then below that, you can see the rain detection. So if there is rain, what do I want it to do? Now, if I set up a rain trigger for this, where let's say it drops all the screens in the rain, it will do that, but what happens in heavy storms where there's heavy rain? You're probably gonna get heavy winds as well. So the way the system works is if the wind is triggered and then rain is triggered, doesn't matter, wind takes precedence, those things are moving up. Now let's say there's rain but no wind, then the rain will work. But in order of precedence, it's always wind first. So if that's triggered, nothing else happens. Then rain, then sun. So if let's say you're in a heavy storm and you have it set up to drop the screens in the rain, if there's heavy wind, those screens are gonna go right back up. So just something to keep in mind. So for this example, I'm gonna have the triggered action be to close the unit when there's rain and save that, and then I can test the trigger and be good to go. So that's how you set up the smart controls for your luxury pergola. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to us. We have a dedicated team that helps out with all this stuff. We've all been through the entire setup process. And thank you for watching. We hope you enjoy your screen for many years to come.